Hello! Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a technically funny night. That's right, a technically funny night of comedy and science. Are you ready to have a good time tonight? Ladies and gentlemen, are you ready to have a good time? Yeah! Yes! So let's get started. We're going to begin with a science talk show, and then we're going to have a comedy game show and some of the best stand-up comedy Barcelona has to offer. So let's begin with our science talk show, yeah? All right. So I'd like to begin by welcoming my beautiful co-host tonight. She has long, blonde, lustrous hair. She's beautiful. She's a model, an actor, all sorts of talented. Please give a warm welcome to our guest co-host, Mr. Christopher Drifter.
Thank you very much, Matt.
Welcome, Christopher.
I'm excited. It's my first time hosting this illustrious show. I'm replacing Hannah. If any of you were expected to see Hannah, perhaps it's not so different, right? Awkward chuckles from the audience.
Both raging bitches with blonde hair. Mm-hmm. Okay. So as a friendly reminder, this science talk show is recorded live and broadcasted across the world to millions of viewers and listeners every week. And as a reminder to our listeners at home, we're actually recording this in front of a studio audience of thousands of people. Ladies and gentlemen, why don't you let them know what 1,000 people sound like? Yeah! That's right. And we're actually joined in the audience today because today we're going to talk about science and art. And it's such an interesting topic that Mr. Leonardo da Vinci himself came to the show tonight. I think that's him in the back there, yeah. Let's give Leo a big round of applause, yeah? Welcome, Leo. Love your work. That Mona Lisa wasn't so hot, though. I don't know. A little ambiguous. Sorry. Next time, draw a smile. Okay. Mr. Drifter, why don't you introduce yourself a little bit?
Well, my name is Christopher Drifter. I am a pathological liar. I also do comedy. I do some modeling. I do a radio show on Barcelona City FM called Midday Coffee. What else? That's about it, to be honest. A lot of touching myself at night, really. Awkward chuckles from the audience. It's going remarkably well, I feel.
I think that was just a chuckle of acknowledgement
of
and
recognition.
Understanding.
Yeah, it's true.
A lot of scientists spend their nights that way.
Uh-huh.
Just out of curiosity, how many of you seen the show before? Calm down, please. It's okay. All right, so that means that we have roughly 2,000 fresh eyes for us here tonight.
Exciting.
Let me tell you, you guys are in for a treat. So in tonight's show, in addition to our hugely popular headlines section, we're also going to be playing a game with the audience today, a game based on art and math. And we're going to break down the statistics behind the game. And then we're actually going to introduce an idea where we're going to create our very own card game for scientists by scientists. It's going to be fantastic. And then our guest this evening is Dr. Ramírez Blanco, who studies the imagery of social movements and how it informs our idea of utopia.
You're not an artist, are you, Matt?
Not so much.
No.
Luckily, she is an art historian. Okay, so with that, let's begin our science headlines, yeah?
All right, then let's do it. Do we have a theme for it in the background? Carlos? Oh, never mind. We'll get going, eh? In a rare killing, chimpanzees cannibalize former leader.
My God, is that true? No, it is true. So in a report published in the International Journal of Primatology and publicized, of course, in National Geographic, it was documented that they actually finally documented, caught on video, a rare occurrence of chimps killing a member of their own tribe.
While violence is not an uncommon part of a chimpanzee's life, violent behavior is usually directed at chimps from other tribes or animals of different species.
Indeed, and that's what makes this particular murder so fascinating. The murdered ape himself used to be the leader of the tribe, the alpha male, or as I like to call it, the Matt Murtha male. And until he was overthrown in a little chimpanzee coup about 5 years ago. For the next 3 years, this male lived on the outskirts of the tribe's community. He was ostracized and lost a lot of weight, this or that. Until one day, in the middle of the night, he actually rejoined the tribe and then was murdered in cold blood. The chimps were seen biting and mutilating the body of this formerly alpha male, who ultimately had his throat and genitals ripped out and likely consumed.
Christ. One hypothesis for the behavior was that the apes were testing out a new form of government, doing away with polling and democratic norms, and instead killing and cannibalizing oppositional leaders. The Trump administration is reportedly very interested, noting that Clinton's legs look a lot like jamon. But plans have been delayed as no one can find an American politician as intelligent as the chimpanzees.
Now, this is only the 9th recorded murder of a chimp by its own tribe. Still, a number of commenters are worried about the rise in chimp-on-chimp crime. For me, though, what's most worrisome was that in the article, the authors noted that these chimps were actually also seen using sticks as spears. This is really concerning because this is exactly how the rise of the Planet of the Apes began.
What's the Planet of the Apes, mate?
Planet of the Apes? You don't know it? You animals! You finally done it!
No, it doesn't ring a bell.
Ah, you're never going to be Hannah.
Scientists say if a woman has these 14 qualities, never let her go.
This doesn't sound much like science. Where did you find this?
Oh, it was an article in Business Insider.
Business Insider. You read Business Insider.
Well, to be honest, I misread the name. I thought it said Business Inside Her.
All right. Well, it sounds a bit like not quite the bastion of science I'm used to, but you're trying your best.
Thank you.
So, what did you learn?
Well, the article lists 14 qualities, each with a testimonial from a researcher explaining the importance of that quality.
Okay, that's what we like to call arguing from anecdote, but let's see what they have. All right, so number 1, if she is smarter than you, never let her go.
Oh, that's easy for you then, isn't it?
Because intelligent women are attracted to me, right?
Yeah, I guess there's more than one type of intelligence out there.
I'm sure that they're intelligent, every last one of them. All right, number 2, if she is honest, never let her go.
Does it count as lying if she talks to me in Spanish and I don't understand?
Sí, claro, tío. Qué estúpido eres.
Thanks, Matt. You're a good friend.
It's a joke for our Spanish-speaking audience. All right, number 3, hold on to her if she has a positive outlook.
Or if she can use Microsoft Outlook, because that is really hard.
It is the fucking worst. That's why Gmail for life, yeah? Number 4, she compromises. She makes sacrifices for the relationship.
I don't know, man. I had a girlfriend who used to make sacrifices, and to be honest, it was just a lot of blood in the carpet.
Yeah, and things can get dicey when you run out of goats, huh?
Yeah, that guy knows.
All right, number 6, she laughs at your jokes. Okay, let's try a joke. Let's hear. Christopher, why do mathematicians get mixed up between Halloween and Christmas?
I don't know. Why do mathematicians get mixed up between Halloween and Christmas?
Because Oct 31 is the same as Des 25.
Well, no one from this audience is going to be your girlfriend, are they?
That's all right. I'll keep looking. I'll find her somewhere.
Well, they're always laughing down at the Mental Institute. You can always try that place. You know, what they always say, if at first you don't succeed, go for the ones who don't fully understand the consequences of their consent.
That's worked for you, huh? No, I think maybe instead I'll go down to the Las Ramblas and find your mother.
Ooh. Yeah, mate, and if she doesn't laugh at your jokes, you can show her your penis instead.
Okay, let's move on. Number 10.
Hey, what happened to 7?
7, 8, 9, of course.
Matt, I hate to tell you this, but sometimes funny has the same definition as weird.
It's all the same to me. All right, let's move along.
All right, a Chinese factory has replaced 90% of human workers with robots.
Yes, it's true. Now, some people are worried about immigrants taking their jobs, but what you should really be worried about is machines taking your jobs, right?
As anyone who's seen Terminator would know.
Exactly. According to this report here on the screen, a factory in China replaced 90% of their workers and saw their productivity rise by almost 300%, while the number of defects were cut in half.
Finally solving the robot unemployment crisis once and for all.
Truly important. No, it was noted, though, that the Human Resources Department spent weeks processing all the firings, all the paperwork for firing these employees before outsourcing to a robot HR firm to fire themselves.
The few remaining human workers have been told that dancing the robot at company events is now considered culturally insensitive. That was a good joke. Come on, guys.
I think everybody's just disappointed they can't dance the robot at the office Christmas party anymore. No, but Christopher, I think that you should probably take comfort in this, because you know they'll never take your job, because you need to have a job for them to take.
What, you mean I'm not going to get paid for this?
Not anymore. Okay, well, that's all the news and science for the week.
That's all the laughing I can take, for sure.
I'm telling you. Please, you're too kind. Okay, so tonight we're going to try something new. We're very excited. We have a game, and a game for everybody, and it ties our speaker's theme, art, in with what we're interested, or by we, I mean I, science, right? So this is called the art game. And what it is the trump card game. Each member of the audience, or a select members of the audience, are going to be given a playing card. And the way the game works, when you play it, ta-da, the art game, you deal out all the cards to all the players, right? And then you decide who goes first. And then the person will get a card that looks like Mr. Picasso over there. They select a category. We'll say influence. And then everybody has to report the number of their artist for influence. The player with the highest card wins all the cards, and then they play the next round, right? And the game goes on. The winner of the game is the person who wins all the cards. So we're going to play tonight, but what I want you to keep in the back of the mind is we're going to break down how the game works, and then we're going to redesign the game to create one for scientists by scientists. So I think that what we'll do is we'll actually create, and we can get printed cards ourselves. So in the future, we're going to pick out scientists. We're going to award them values for different categories. And then we'll be able to play ourselves. But let's play a little bit now. You and us, right?
All right, and the winner of this game, I believe, gets a free drink, something like that. So be involved.
Yes.
Be good.
All right, so my beautiful assistant here will pass out some cards, and then we can all play together. Three. Or no, 3 people? We're going to play 3 rounds. Give me a card. All right, so I'm going to start out with, I have Mr. Louis Bourgeois. Get one for Grace there.
I gave them the...
You lost, you got the rules. I need to hire a new beautiful assistant. Okay, so you want a card in the back?
You want a card? Come to the front and we'll give you a card.
All right, so we're going to start. I have Louis Bourgeois, and his highest value is influence for 78. Can anybody beat an influence of 78? 78.
I've got 54. Does that win?
No, it does not
No,
win.
what have you got?
Grace. 88. 85. 88, going once. Going twice. Sold. All right, we have a winner.
Yeah, woo!
Now, normally you would collect all the cards, but this time you get to collect a free drink. Yes. All right, we're going to play another round. So now I have Mr. Jean-Michel Basquiat, and he has, actually, Grace. Grace, you won. Pick a category. Who do you have and what? Who's your artist? Pablo Picasso, the ringer. Everybody can actually see his card on the screen. The beautiful factor. I have 40. What is Mr. Picasso's?
50. We've got a 50 over there.
58?
58. Anyone got more than 58? 71.
71.
Who have you got? Gerard Hipster, the famous artist Gerard Hipster. Perfect. Great. Well, I heard he had a beautiful factor. That's for sure.
All right, one more round, and then we'll move on to the math behind it.
All right. Which one would you like to pick? Critical reception. I've got 64.
Andy Warhol with 77.
Anyone got a bit more than 77? What have you got? 68. That's not higher than 77. Matt,
89.
you've won a free drink.
That's all right. She won. All right, do we have any statisticians in the audience? No, statisticians. One in the back? You just use it. You don't want to like represent it. That's all right. All right. So what I've done now, though, is I've actually entered all the values for all the cards and all the artists. So there's about 30 artists represented in the deck, and they all have different values. Now you can imagine different ways that this game could be played. Yeah, you could have the creators of the game could have assigned values in such a way that every artist is actually equal, but they have strengths and weaknesses that all even out. But what actually was done is that we have artists that are strong, considered more strong or stronger than the rest, right? So if we go on to the next slide, you can actually see our top performing artists. So Mr. Picasso, representing Spain, is actually the most powerful card in the deck. Not a lot of Spanish in here tonight, huh? Or you're just very Spanish. Meh. All right. So you can add all the scores up together, and you get a sum. And if Picasso wins that, Picasso also has the highest average. And then what I've done is I've calculated the percentile rank for each individual value. So for Mr. Picasso, take his top auction price of $104 million, I think, is the highest. It's the highest auction rank. So he's in the 99th percentile, of course. There we go. So then you average this basically works as a probability that he will win in that given category. You can then average the probability that they'll win in every given category for what I call the aggregated chance to win. So he's got, anytime you have Picasso in your hand, you have almost an 80% chance to win. Calm down. I mean, I understand that math is exciting, but really, keep your clothes on. Okay, and then we can also see our lowest performing artists in the next slide.
Are you on there?
I'll spoil the... Yeah. Oh, no.
Back one.
Banksy.
There we go. Banksy,
and a surprise
what?
to me, he was the least powerful artist in the deck. Do you guys agree?
Yeah, he was the best one, wasn't he?
Not by a long shot.
Oh, dear.
How many are in the deck?
32. Oh, yeah, he's below average. Hate to break it to you. Yeah.
I can relate to that.
Yeah. If you guys are interested, I can give you the full list. But what I want to hammer home here, though, is that there are actually better or worse cards to have. And so when we create our game, so in the following weeks, if you come back to the show, you can help us create the game together, and then we'll actually print the cards out, and you can take home your very own Scientist Trump card game. Really, your reaction is overwhelming.
Who would be the best scientist, do you reckon? Who are you going to put first?
That's a great question. I want to use living scientists, and so I would have to say that Matthew Murtha is probably the most powerful?
But do scientists really have a life?
No, not the good ones. Anyway, so
Who
if
would,
we
who
move,
would the worst one be? Sarah Palin.
yeah.
Yeah.
Wait, I would like to pick an actual scientist. Amanda Hated. She was in my lab when I was in PhD.
Okay.
The worst, absolute worst. All right. So, what kind of questions can we answer with this game? Ta-da! So, what about the scientists? Yeah. So, I want to create our own game. What we have to decide in the upcoming weeks and upcoming shows is who should be selected. Do we pick the most famous ones? Einstein, Niels Bohr, Matthew Murtha, Linus Pauling, or do we pick living scientists and recognize them for their accomplishments now? We could pick Barcelona scientists. Every time I'm telling you I'm going to be the best one. What categories should you grade them on? Does anybody have a suggestion? Impact factor. Yes. All right.
Sexiness.
Sexiness. Okay.
Willingness to put out.
I'm sure they're all going to
Their
score
exact
close
phone
to
number.
0.
No? Okay.
These are things that are important to you in a scientist.
Likelihood to create the apocalypse.
Good one. I like that one. Any other suggestions?
Number of buildings named after them. That was good.
That is a good one.
Yeah.
Likelihood to save the planet.
Or likelihood to shave the planet.
All right. What else do we have? This is any game theorist in the audience. Okay. A lot. So you can actually design the game mathematically and decide how you want to play. We can follow the rules of this game, where everybody just selects a card at random, and you win based on the likelihood of getting a strong card. Or we can design the game such that all the cards are even, and you actually have to use some strategy and pick and save an artist or a scientist, and wait until that into a category that they're strong in. I know it's exciting. I know you guys are dying to create the game with us, but this will all happen in weeks ahead of time. So, let's move on and invite our guest to the stage, yeah?
My God, we've got such a good guest for you tonight. You're going to love her. She's amazing.
That is.
Is she a scientist?
She is a researcher.
A researcher. What does that mean?
She is an art historian with a PhD in art history.
So she's actually going to be interesting.
Yes.
That's exciting. I'm excited.
A change of pace for technically funny. All right. So with that, I would like to welcome Dr. Julia Ramírez Blanco.
I feel like we've got good rapport already, Julia. Strong rapport. Thank you. Yeah,
This one's not really working.
Here, use mine.
Yeah, that was it. Hi, thank you for inviting me, Matt, and it's great to be here.
I invited you too.
Thank you for inviting me, Christopher. Well,
do a sound check on this one? No? Okay, all right.
Okay. Well, before going on with the questions, I'm going to explain a little bit of what I do. So, I've decided to title this technically utopian because I'm going to talk a bit about the concept of utopia. Anybody in the audience is familiar with the concept of utopia or interested in utopian literature or whatever? Great. Okay, let's begin. Please, Carlos? I'm actually an art historian. Like, my training was art history, so it was a little bit like the metaphor of this naked lady there surrounded by paintings and sculptures. So basically, in our studies, we just got to learn the history of art in different epochs, and in a way, we acquired training in how to look at images, and what do images mean, and so on. So I was also interested in social change and in politics and social transformation. So I got to the conclusion that utopia was kind of a natural place where politics and art got together, kind of the creative impulse and the impulse to change the way things are. So utopia was actually a concept invented in the 16th century by humanist Thomas More. Here you can see his portrait. And he developed this concept in his novel entitled Utopia from 1516, where he described the ideal government of a non-existing island, the island of Utopia. He even created an alphabet, you can see on the right, for this non-existing perfect society. In this book, he already talked about two possible origins of the word: otopos, from Greek no place, or utopos, from the Greek good place. So the meanings of utopia have always been in between these two spaces of the possible and the desirable, what we would want and what we would never have. So theorists of utopia have spoken of the three faces of utopia. One would be utopian literature, which comes from Thomas More, which are books that describe non-existing perfect societies, and there's a whole tradition of these, centuries-long traditions. They're very boring books because they're just descriptions, not much action going on. And there's social theory, which takes utopia as a concept through which we can understand our collective dreams and fears. And utopian practice. You can have the 60s communes, political action, any sort of thing that actually tries to bring these kind of things into reality. So I was looking at these things and I was thinking, yeah, but what about art? That is what I actually studied. So art has a very obvious application to utopia and representation. There are many paintings which represent ideal places, from golden ages to paradises. Please, Carlos? Here's our paradise. To ideal cities and many different ways of representing that. And
is everyone always naked in utopia?
I think there are kind of two types of utopia, the dressed utopia and the naked utopia.
I'll let you guess which one is my favorite.
Two traditions.
Yeah.
This mic sucks, dude. Is this the utopia where you have sex with horses and lie about it to your girlfriend?
Yeah. Polyamory with animals.
Is there any other kind of utopia?
Okay. Yeah, well, we actually have like traditions, oral traditions of utopia which talk about kind of orgiastic environments, really, like the land of cocaine and places where like there's lots of food and lots of sex and lots of freedom. There's like a very extensive oral tradition from the Middle Ages, like popular classes dreaming about these places. There's songs even. Okay, but let's continue. And in the 20th century, artists also tried to bridge this gap between representation and reality, and they tried to do it a bit through politics. And we have, for example, the Russians with this monument, which was actually quite scientific. Or Picasso, this powerful card genius, with his Guernica. So anyways, I was continuing my research, and everybody was saying, you know, utopia has nothing to do with our current world. Utopia is over. So I was thinking, what about contemporary utopian practice? And I was having these questions, and I was looking at contemporary artists when this happened in my city. Any of you know what it is? Yeah? I heard that.
The Spanish youth.
Yeah. Yeah, so the camp in Puerta del Sol started when I was beginning my PhD, and I was like, you know, this is very clearly a practical utopia. They're actually carrying on utopian practice. This is kind of a little commune which is happening in the center of the city. So I started following this thread. So what I started to do, Carlos, is I started writing text which amounted to a book. And what I was doing there, I was looking at the space in the middle of kind of artistic creativity, activism, and utopian practice and communitarian practice. So I started following this thread, and actually what I was doing here, I was doing visual studies, which is the study of visuality, which is not necessarily art, but kind of the visual phenomenons which surround us in this very, very visual world we live in. So following the thread, I got to an old campaign from the beginning of the 90s, which was in a squatted street called Claremont Road, where the people squatted a whole street and kind of turned it into an installation with paintings, murals, sculptures, And all these elements were actually geared up also for confrontation because there was a whole community going on, but they knew that they would be desalojados, evicted. They knew that they would be evicted.
That's the word.
So when they were actually evicted, all these things turned into barricades and they built this tower and these nets, and they put rave music through this tower, and they turned the eviction into a spectacle, into a show, and kind of a big party too. So this led to another collective, which was called Reclaim the Streets, who did a series of illegal raid parties in the middle of the cities, interrupting the regular functioning of the city and building like free environments, and with poetic actions such as these stilt walkers. Inside them, there was activists who were drilling the floor, and you couldn't hear that because of the sound of the party, but they were actually drilling the floor to plant trees, which came from the area of Claremont Road. So these parties grew bigger and bigger, and they went to get together with what would be called the anti-globalization movement, which became famous in Seattle, although it had been preparing in the previous years, where they actually stopped the meeting of the World Trade Organization. And in these mobilizations, you could already see that the old model of political mobilization, which followed kind of the model of the army, a unified crowd that's advancing in a fixed direction, had got mixed up with the model of the countercultural festival, where people kind of don't move in a definite direction and where the crowd is non-homogenized, where there's different groups. And for example, this group, which was called the Pink Bloc, they were opposing the police with their disguises of kind of stereotypical and parodical femininity. So the policemen actually went back because they didn't feel they could actually hit a woman that was dressed up so ridiculously as a woman. So it's kind of this performance of femininity and what they called tactical frivolity, which was using frivolity and humor as a means of confrontation or of avoiding confrontation. So finally, in spite of these efforts, the movement got trapped in confrontation. And this even added to a death in 2001 in Genoa. And the movement went into a certain latency after the big mobilizations against the war of Iraq. So after this period of latency where activism continued happening in different countercultural places, I got to the case study which actually brought me to this whole story, which was the Sol Camp, which was following a model that was at that time coming from the Arab Spring, from the camp of Tahrir. The architecture was similar. Here we have Madrid, here we have an assembly, the rest zone, the food stalls. So this talks about how the camp was being built following theories which are very frequent in urbanism of division of zones by activity. So we have a lot of maps that were being built and reflected the changing of the space. So I studied the spatial structure, also the performativity, how the crowd behaved in a certain manner, which was kind of creating collective performances. This is a general assembly. And I also studied the posters. There was a constant making of posters, such as also happened in similar camps all around the world, which were oscillating between politics, poetry, and humor. And they occupied all the space, creating meaning which was unified through collage situation. The layers sort of got on top of each other. So, please. What I called these kind of case studies in the book was utopias of revolt, because they looked at the same time to the building of a better society, to the creation of a different world, and to the destruction of the current world. So they were looking at the same time forward and backwards, like this Roman god Janus, which is the god of looks at the past and looks at the future at the same time. So this is what I do, and now we can open the debate and the questions.
Excellent. I have a number of questions for you, as you can imagine. First off, what's really striking about your work is how you go from, an idyllic horse-fucking utopia where everybody's naked to the actual lived experience in these kind of occupied protests. I mean, all of those photos really reminded me of the time of Occupy Wall Street, which I was lucky enough to take part of. So how do you feel about this kind of the sad reality of fighting for utopia? As you said, like the utopias of revolt, where growth can only come through destruction.
Yeah. I was interviewing a guy who finally became a friend for a long time, and he's been like a lifelong activist, and it's like his way of life. And he always said that you had to have an equilibrium between the yes and the no, and that some people went for the yes, and it's, like people who were involved in 68, the hippies, and then you got Silicon Valley and Ben and Jerry's kind of stuff. So it's like if you slip too much to the yes, you stop fighting the society you have. And if you slip too much to the no, then you end up getting trapped in conflict and you're not really doing anything. And it's not livable. So, like, personally, I'm not a conflicted person, so that kind of conflictual part of it made me feel uncomfortable. And I think it's a balance which is maybe very, very difficult to maintain.
Do you think that conflict is necessary for change?
Yes. Though I sometimes think it might not be worthwhile in human experience.
Change is probably inherently conflictive.
Conflictive.
Because anytime you go from one state to another, there's a tension between the two states. That is like the nature of conflict. Yeah? All right. I'll take that as a yes.
What's your vision of utopia?
This.
Okay, this is very freaky. I go to utopian conferences. There are 2 associations of utopian studies, and I only once met a guy who had a utopian vision of society, and that's always very scary when somebody thinks that they have like all the answers. I think utopia is more like a horizon, like a place you look at.
A goal, not a destination.
Yeah, exactly.
Or a fantasy that's impossible to reach.
Yeah, I think it's always in between these things, and I think that's what's interesting. I think it's a fantasy that kind of puts you away from reality and can make you feel calm, it can be soothing. But at the same time, what's interesting of this fantasy is that it can actually interfere into life. And that's what I'm interested in arts generally, in how this fantasy at the same time stays into Fantasyland and changes our current ways of living and of experiencing reality.
So your studies, are they more about observing what happens, or are you hoping to inform movements and help them be more effective? Or?
When I started the book, I had the grandiloquent aim of helping activism. But then, I got to know activism better, and I don't have that goal anymore.
You don't want to help them anymore?
Yes, I do, but I think it's more complex than just a book helping, because I think activism right now has very good tactics, but somehow I think the problem might be in the larger picture. I don't know. Well, yes, I did have this.
What do you think about activism for the right wing? We see a lot of right-wing activists now, which perhaps most of us might disagree with, but they're using similar strategies.
Yes.
They're moving towards their own utopias. Do you think that the things you've studied would inform and help them?
I find that very disturbing, because there are some approaches to this kind of things, like activist art things, where they just give you the tools to generate powerful images. And these images are most of the time coming from kind of anarchist or left-wing movements, but can be used by anyone, actually. So it's the prostitution of images, and images have always been a bit of a prostitutes.
Yeah. Filthy whores.
Yeah.
Now, before we move on to questions from the audience, because we have to wrap up kind of quickly, what I'm interested in knowing a little bit is what are your methodologies, and how do you find that they differ from maybe the hard sciences, where we, as much as possible, adhere to the scientific method of observation, hypothesis, testing, etc.?
Well, in humanities, the methodologies is much more fluid than in the sciences. So it depends a lot on...
You can just make it up, basically.
No, you can,
Spoken like a scientist.
You can see what it needs, what each case needs. For example, this, it asked for lots of interviews, so I was interviewing a lot. But if I were to study 19th century art, which I was studying last year, you can't interview people. So we kind of mix methodologies from history, because history of art is kind of a frivolous daughter of history. And we also use methodologies which have to do with the observation of images and analysis of images and how they relate to each other. So,
But do you find that your goal or your argument changes as you go through the process, or are you always just collecting evidence for what you thought was true at the beginning?
I don't work so much with an hypothesis. I think in the humanities it's kind of fake in a way. Because you're researching, you're like wanting to see what you find. You can't just say, you know, like, I'm going to find that activism is...
Like scientists do, you know, with your hypotheses.
Well, yeah, and I would argue it's been fairly successful, you know, utilizing that method, but...
It's just different. We don't have lab conditions, for example. It's qualitative research. It's different. I'm not saying that maths should behave like humanities, because I just think it has different logics.
Yeah, but what exactly are those differences, and where do they lie? If you could guess.
I would say that the conditions, you know, the lab has exploded in the humanities. You can't isolate the phenomenon, so there's a whole lot of variables going in. And also the ideas of truth are much more subjective. We kind of work by knowing that we're not going to find absolute truth, but just kind of partial truth, like small truths that amount and dialogue with each other. So
you guys really go easy on yourselves.
It's different.
Like, I'm not going to discover anything true, but I'm going to write a book on it.
Well, we discover things which are true, but it's like non-cap locks truth, you know?
All right.
But yeah, I think it's quite different.
It's not my truth.
And also, when you work with the contemporary, then it's even more different because you don't have the time perspective, and there's things that like people call like participant research when you're actually taking part of something, or militant research when you're actually militing in the kind of thing you're researching. So it becomes a bit complex and borrows things from different disciplines. I think it's different. I don't know if I explained how, but...
Yeah, no, that's fine. I think those differences are very worthwhile, though. So I think at this point I'd like to open questions to the audience, if anybody has any questions for our guest tonight. Yes?
Sorry, I just have two. Let me just clarify two things. I'd like it if you could clarify. These are based off ideologies of that you're an activist of supporting utopia. Could you explain that to me? Because it wasn't quite clear to me.
Yeah, I'm not an activist in supporting utopia because there's so many utopias that doesn't really... I began the research because of activism, but then the research was trying to explain activism. It was not like trying to gain fans or something like that. I was trying to understand certain dynamics of activism through their visual production.
Well, I'm not sure that if, based on the fact that this is also Greek ideology, having, for example, utopia that you had just briefly talked about, it's also something that's interesting. I don't know if you had in mind keeping point the herbs, civitas, and polite, that were also something that had to do with their identity to what it was to a city, their policy, and even the architectural civitas, which was their structure that they had their identity to. I mean, because later, as you see, it was something that was developed later by the Italians, even though it was something, created by these Greek ideologies from these philosophies. So I'm interesting to ask you, how is it that this can be something that if you look at it more on a historical perspective, going even farther than that, what could you explain a real reason for that?
Well, I would say that our idea here in the Western world, our idea of democracy is Greek. Yeah. We have the metaphor of the agora, and that was one of the metaphors that the Occupy camps were working on, this idea of democracy as a place of discussion, of public discussion. So this was definitely a very strong metaphorical element that was going on. But as I say, this is a metaphor because you can't, when you had assemblies like the ones you have in Puerta del Sol, they were symbolic. You can't have an assembly with 1,000 people discussing. It works in smaller groups. So it had a symbolic element, and I found that many activists involved from the beginning were conscious of this symbolic element. We have the Greek metaphors, but it's a metaphor. I mean, also Greek society was based on slavery. It's like more of a concept, a poetic concept than a historical evolution. But it has to do with our more primary ideas of what democracy is, which is like speaking. It's what the Western world has in mind when we think about democracy.
Yes, but even Greek methodologies that even came not just from Greek, but then they converted from European democracy into that, and globalization in the sense with trade things to Europeans, and when they moved on from globalizing. I mean, you have how it was, a key perspective of slave labor, which contributed to that. So I mean, it's interesting what you're saying. I mean, I think there is some sort of qualitative and quantitative research to that too.
No, we're definitely.
Well, I'll say as a scientist, you can quantitate anything. If you try hard enough, you can quantitate it all. We have to move on, though. That was a great comment, though. Thank you. Yeah, no, thank you for participating. So with that, before we end the show tonight, let's play our favorite game with our guests. It's called Fuck, Marry, Kill.
Are you familiar with this game? Oh, fuck this. Are you familiar with this game? Yeah.
All right.
Okay. Well,
So Christopher is going to draw 3 random artists from the deck of cards, and our guest tonight has to decide of those 3 whom she's going to fuck, whom she's going to marry, and who she will kill.
All right, so first of all, we have, I don't know if you can see very well here, you're going to have to imagine, we have Andy Warhol, Cindy Sherman. If you can't see the picture, it looks a little bit like me. And let's go for Pablo Picasso. People probably know those ones.
Okay, so who's it going to be?
Okay, I think the only fuckable option. Hey, is this working? I think the only... No, it's not working.
Yeah, it's working. We can... Oh, bloody hell. I think it's just you. I'm fine.
I'm breaking the mics. It's,
Hello.
It's just my energy. I think the only fuckable option is Picasso, but he would probably fuck me, not the other way around, because it's probably more his modus operandi. Andy Warhol and Cindy Sherman are just not options. Terrible. Are just not options. Didn't
So
have
wait,
too much of a toast.
you're going to fuck Pablo Picasso.
Okay, yes.
And Andy Warhol.
I'm going to marry Cindy Sherman. She's very rich, and we could just like.
She's rich. She's old now too, I imagine.
Yeah, I mean it's going to be short-lived marriage. I couldn't kill Andy Warhol because he's already dead, but I could.
You could dig him up and do your best.
I could fire on his grave. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Good. So that's exciting. Should we do another round?
No. Sadly, we don't have the time. We have to end it now. The title of your book is what?
Utopías Artísticas de Revuelta. You can find it on your bookstores.
Yes. Buy that libro. All right. So that is our show tonight. I want to thank our guest, Dr. Julio Ramírez
Thank you very
Blanco.
much.
I want to thank everybody who's a part of the Technically Funny Science Talk Show, DJ Charms, my beautiful co-host, Christopher Drifter, and the lovely Hannah Becker. I'm Matthew Murtha. Stick around. We're going to have a comedy game and stand-up comedy in 10 minutes. Yes! Yeah! Get excited.